fantasy break.
The Los Angeles Chargers are going to be a very, very fun team to watch this year. And looking just off last year, they had a great season in Jim Harbaugh's first year as head coach for them. You have Justin Herbert at the helm. You know, he got paid his extension a couple of years back, and he has looked great in every single season, at least in the regular season. You got two running backs, a vet and a rookie, who should bring a lot of explosiveness to this team. You got a receiver core with some young bucks, as well as a familiar face coming in. And then in the tight end room, you got a couple bums and a special draft pick that could add a lot to the receiving game. And there has been a big injury to their left tackle as well. So a lot to unpack in this episode, which is episode 17 of the 32 team series. Now, if you have not checked out episodes 1 through 16, definitely go back, check those out. Some great content on our YouTube and Spotify channel, and you can kind of see the format that we are running through for these episodes. But we're going to be covering the entirety of the whiteboard that is to my right here. So got a lot of stuff to discuss, and there's a lot of new faces on this team. So it's going to be exciting to kind of see how these numbers are going to work out, and how good is this Chargers team going to be this year. So looking at, the quarterback, I talked about Justin Herbert. He's looked great, at least in terms of fantasy. He put together a really solid season last year, 3,800 yards in the air, 300 rushing yards, 25 total touchdowns, and actually only threw 3 interceptions, which is a career low. So Justin Herbert in the regular season had a really good year in Harbaugh's first year as head coach. So I think looking into Harbaugh's second year now, another year with that system, with the Greg Roman offense, I'm very confident that Herbert can take that next step. And I think that kind of leads into the weapons that they've added around Herbert, because last year they had some all right weapons. They had J.K. Dobbins, the running back. They had Ladd McConkey as a rookie, Quentin Johnston, but they have upgraded significantly from last year. So looking at the running back room, you have Omarion Hampton, first round pick out of North Carolina, over 2,000 total yards last year, 17 touchdowns, along with 38 catches, a true 3-down back. And, if Jim Harbaugh is going to take a running back in the first round, you better believe they're going to use him. And then he's going to pair up with Najee Harris, who's a veteran running back, profiles more as a in between the tackles, can handle a big workload type of player. Now, he did suffer an eye injury on the 4th of July due to setting off some fireworks. So he is still injured to this point, hasn't really been taking any reps. And we don't really know when we're going to see him this season, whether that's week 1 or whether that's week 8. So pretty good balance of running backs here. But the balance that I really like the most on this team is the receiver room. You have Ladd McConkey, who's going to be the best of the bunch. Coming into his second year, the receiver out of Georgia, he's going to be playing mostly out of the slot, and he is a terrific receiver. Reminds me of a prime Cooper Kupp or a younger Cooper Kupp. 82 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns last year. Had a great season, and I think that, the one thing about Ladd McConkey is that he is a really talented player, and I think a lot of people are going to be high on him going into this season. I'm a little bit more skeptical due to some of the other weapons that have been added to this team, and then kind of the guys that he's being drafted around. So that'll all be part of the fantasy forecast. But we already talked about Omarion Hampton, adding him in the running back room. You lose J.K. Dobbins, you bring in 2 better backs, especially with Hampton. And then in the receiver room, you have Trey Harris comes in, second round pick out of Ole Miss, 60 catches, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns last year when he was teamed up with Jackson Dart. Now, Trey Harris is a player that a lot of people really like. Me personally, I think he's an all right player. I don't think he's anything special. I don't think he's going to do anything to even come close to overtaking Ladd as the top receiver on this team. But when you compare him to the other option that they have on the outside, which is Quentin Johnston, they're going to be really fighting for that X role on the outside, going to be that number 1 target, especially when it comes to the goal line touches. And if they're going to throw red zone fades, red zone slants, who's going to be that top guy? And, Johnston, to kind of talk about him as well, he had a much better year than his rookie year. He had 55 catches, 700 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Like, he did not have a bad season at all last year. Now, granted, he was, one of 2 receivers on the team that was actually relevant. And so I think with Quentin Johnston, he obviously has the drop issues. They go out, they add Trey Harris, they added McConkey the year before. So you do have to be somewhat concerned, but I think you have to assume that with Trey Harris and Quentin Johnston, the way that I see it is that they're just going to keep eating into each other's touches. They're both going to get a decent amount of playing time on the outside because now the Chargers recently, a few days ago, brought in Keenan Allen, who obviously, has a ton of experience on this Chargers team. This is where he grew his career. He was there for majority of years before he was, on a short stint with Chicago. But Keenan Allen comes in, even off a quote unquote washed year last season, still had 70 catches for 750 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now he is coming up on his age 34 season, so you have to assume that they're not going to be playing him a heavy amount of snaps. He's going to be more of an experienced guy in, the receiver room where Quentin Johnson, Lad McConkey, and Trey Harris are all under the age of 24, 25. So you got an experienced vet who is a good player. You can plug and play him all over the offense. And it is going to be interesting to see how these snap shares work out with Keenan Allen being a primary slot receiver and Lad McConkey also being a slot receiver. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works out. And we truly won't know until week 1 comes around. Looking at the tight end room, it's not very exciting, but you have Will Dissly coming off a decent year, 50 catches, a little bit south of 500 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. I don't really have much to say about Will Dissly. I mean, he's a solid option in terms of the fact that he's in a good offense and he is the starter. But the guy that I'm a little bit more intrigued by is Oronde Gadsden, day 3 pick out of Syracuse University. Back to back, not back to back, but in his last 2 fully healthy seasons at Syracuse, 70 plus catches, 900 plus yards, 6 plus touchdowns in both seasons. And, that might seem that's good stats, nothing great. But then when you say that he's a tight end, it makes it a lot better. So I think Oronde Gadsden, he is a sleeper. And I think for him, it's going to be tougher to get on the field due to some struggles with his blocking, especially in a Harbaugh-led offense. But as a vertical threat, Gadsden is everything you want. Great hands, great speed and size combination, very athletic. So really like Oronde Gadsden as a sleeper, especially in your dynasty leagues. If you need to stash for a tight end or if you're in a tight end premium league, I think Gadsden's a good player. But for this year, he's not going to be too relevant. And then, I don't talk about the O-line too much typically, but I think it is relevant to say that Rashawn Slater, their star left tackle, they just signed him to a big $25 million deal for 4 years. I think it was it was something in his knee, something in his leg he tore. I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but he's going to be out for the season. So Joe Alt, who is a stud tackle, is going to move from the right side to the left side. But this is a huge blow for the offense. You're going to have a right tackle coming in now with Troy Pipkins that is not very good. And so this is going to hurt, the status of these running backs. And these are all very recent, with Keenan Allen and this injury. These are both very recent news stories. So kind of excited that I was able to talk about the Chargers in this time because it seems like now we have a lot more accurate information of what's going on. So how does that all kind of work into the player projections? I have Herbert passing for 3,700 yards this year and 29 touchdowns on about 340 completions. Now, I do think this is going to be a run-first offense. I think the team's going to be good. They're going to be playing from ahead a lot of the time. So with Herbert, I have him finishing as my quarterback 12. I have him as, great gunslinger. The weapons improved a ton. You add 2 receivers to this team to an already good core. You add a really good running back who is also a good receiving running back. Chargers could be a run first team, which does scare me a little bit on the potential of scoring touchdowns, especially when it does come to the goal line for Herbert and anything inside the 5. But I do like Herbert's rushing upside a lot as well, where he had, a little bit over 300 rush yards last year. So if he can be even more aggressive this year and potentially get 3 to 4 rushing touchdowns, that could edge him a little bit higher than some of those other quarterbacks in that range. Because Herbert's going as the quarterback 14. And like I said, I have him at the 12. So I've mentioned in other episodes, anyone from quarterback 8 to quarterback, 20, I have them all very similar in projected points. But Herbert is a guy where I like his rushing upside, I like his ability to throw the ball, and I like the offense that he's in. So Herbert's a very good value, in my opinion. I think he is as safe as you can get in that range. Let's look at some of the other receivers. Lad McConkey is currently getting drafted as the receiver 11. So I kind of mentioned that a lot of people are riding that high from last year with McConkey. And it does scare me a little bit, to be truthfully honest with you, because he was, he did only finish as the receiver 14 on the season, and you're getting drafted higher than that. Now, you can always assume that you'll improve from year 1 to year 2, but we also have to look at the fact that They add Trey Harris. They add Keenan Allen. They add Omarion Hampton. There's going to be more mouths to feed on this offense. So even if he was just a rookie, he might be a better player, but we don't know if that target share is still going to be as high as it was last year. I still really do like McConkey as a player, so I do have him in my, upper echelon tier of receivers, but he is one of those last, I don't want to call him elite, but those very good receivers with, Drake London, AJ Brown, T Higgins, kind of in that tier, Rashee Rice of players. So with McConkey, I have him projected for about 1,050 yards, a little bit under 100 catches, and 7 touchdowns. So I have him having a very similar season to what he did last year, which would be great. And I think he's going to provide a very high week-to-week floor. But I just don't know now with the Keenan Allen signing if he's going to be as good, because now he's going to lose out on snaps in the slot. And on top of that, you have a target hog in the slot with Keenan Allen, who already has a connection with Justin Herbert as well. He's a player that they're going to rely on. And it just means there's another guy that's going to be taking targets in this offense. So that's why I was definitely a lot higher on McConkey before the Keenan Allen signing. I had to definitely move him down about 4 slots or so, at least for this season with that. In Dynasty, he's still a great asset. Keenan Allen's probably only staying for 1 year or so. But just looking at strictly this year, it is a little bit concerning. And I think you have to move him down a tier because of that addition of Keenan Allen. Looking at some of the other receivers, I don't think that Trey Harris, Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, any of them are super relevant. I think with all of them, you're getting them in the receiver 5 to 6 range. They're going to be at the ends of your bench on, your regular redraft teams. I think in best ball, the guy that I'm looking at is Quentin Johnston, because he did catch 8 touchdowns last year. He has big play potential. They're going to throw a lot of deep balls his way. And so I really like QJ in that best ball format. But in terms of your regular redraft leagues, I just don't think I can trust any of these guys enough, where I have them all in the 400 to 600 yards range, 50 catches and, 4 to 5 touchdowns between all of them, with all of it, dispersed to an extent. I think I have Keenan for more like 3 touchdowns and QJ more for 5 to 6, but you kind of get the point. I have them all in the same range, where I have QJ finishing as my receiver 67, Trey Harris is my receiver 54, and Keenan Allen is my receiver 79. So I'm a little bit lower on Allen. I do have to move him up, I think, still more. But with all these guys, I don't think that any of them are that special. I think Trey Harris is the upside play in this receiver room, just because he is a rookie. He could be the top end option on the outside if he can fully overtake Keenan Allen, or not Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston. So I do think Trey Harris has a lot of upside. And the one thing that I do want to mention about Trey Harris is he had the highest yards per route run out of all receivers in the draft. Now, historically, if you look at the past few drafts, the guy who's come out with the highest yards per route run has been a stud almost every year. It was, I think, Malik Neighbors last year. It was Puka Nacua the year before. CeeDee Lamb was in there. Jamar Chase was in there. It's a stat where if you have a high yards per route run, it translates to a lot of fantasy points and a lot of expected production for that next season. So, regardless of how you feel about Trey Harris, he did have very good statistics for those. And if he is able to become that traditional X receiver in this offense, then he is the guy that's going to be able to rise the most on this roster, in my opinion. So, I like him more than QJ and Allen in your regular redraft leagues. But QJ is my top option in best ball, especially where, on underdog, if you're playing there, it's going to be a half PPR format, which makes guys like Keenan Allen a little bit less valuable. Will Dissly is going to come in at my tight end 31. Now he's going as a tight end 43, which is pretty underrated because he is the starting tight end on a good offense. And I've mentioned it in previous episodes. If you are a good tight end in a good offense, regardless of how good of a player you are, there's going to be production there. There's going to be touchdown opportunities. There's going to be other guys that are going to be seeing a lot of coverage and attention. So I think Will Dissly, he's not really relevant in your regular redraft leagues. But in best ball, if you have Justin Herbert, I think he is definitely worth the stack there. And I mentioned Oronde Gadsden. I don't think he's a draftable player, but if Dissly does go down, Oronde Gadsden is going to be a very hot waiver wire pickup that week. Looking at the running back room, Omarion Hampton is one of my guys this year that I think is getting very underrated in drafts. Ashton Jeanty, while is a terrific prospect, goes top 10 in the draft, is getting drafted in the first round. and or early second round of drafts, and Hampton's going in like the fourth round. Hampton lands in a great offense in the Chargers. He's extremely talented, had great production, can do everything you want as a running back. I don't understand why he's going as low as the running back 17 right now in drafts. Now it's going to be funny because I actually have him as my RB 18 in drafts. At least, again, this is all in redraft. And that's because we don't know with Najee Harris what it's going to look like. Najee Harris has not missed a game in his entire career to this point through 4 seasons. And that's where it kind of gets me, is that he's a very durable player. He plays games. They're going to give him the ball. They signed him for a reason, especially when it comes to the goal line. He could snag some of those touches. But I am continuing to slowly inch Hampton up my board because of the fact that he has the receiving value and that Najee Harris continues to not practice. And while Najee Harris is a vet and it kind of seems easier to just plug and play him, this is a new team for him. He's been on Pittsburgh for 4 years. So he doesn't know the offense. He hasn't gotten reps with this team. So the fact that Hampton's getting all these first team reps and the fact that he is a better running back, I think Hampton truly does have top 7 to 10 running back potential this season, and you're getting him around the RB 18, RB 17 range. So with Hampton, I have him projected for about 900 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, but I also have him going for 40 catches for about, a little bit over 300 yards and then another 2 to 3 touchdowns. So I have him having a terrific season. I think he has a ton of upside and a lot more upside than guys in that range. And first round running backs historically have done very well in fantasy their rookie years, especially when they get drafted to very good teams like the Chargers that are disciplined, but also have very good talent across the board. So Hampton, I think, is probably my favorite pick on this team to draft. If you're looking for upside, I think Hampton's your guy in that range of running backs where you have Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Walker, James Conner. I think he just has the highest upside out of all of those players. Even a guy like Kyren Williams, just because of the lack of pass volume that he gets, I think Hampton could overtake him and could, with his talent, inch into that top 10. And I want to say, this is again in redraft. In best ball, I think Hampton's even higher because you're playing for the highest upside there. So in redraft, you got to be a little bit more condescending of, where you're drafting these players. You only have one team and you are going to be managing that. But in best ball, I like Hampton even more as a complete smash in the 3rd round or even the 4th round if he still falls there. Najee Harris is going to be the RB2 on this team. I got him coming in as my running back 35. He's going as the running back 36. I think his role is being a very solid redraft player for bye weeks. He could come in, have 60 rush yards per game. He could, score a touchdown here and there, but I don't think he's ever going to be a player to give you more than 15 to 18, fantasy points in any given week. So his upside's very low, but I think his floor is also high, where if he's on the field, you can assume he's going to be getting, around 10 to 15 carries a game. And so if you're getting 10 to 15 carries a game in a good offense, he'll get a decent amount of rush yards. So I think you can expect from him every week around 6 to 12 points if I had to guess. So he's a good player, good running back 3. I think he's a fine ad, but no upside here. High floor, low ceiling player, which personally I usually stay away from. But I think if you go with 2 really high caliber running backs early on, I think Harris is a very good 3rd option to plug and play if you need to. Let's move on to the strength of schedule here. Their strength of schedule is very average across the board. You have the 13th hardest for quarterbacks, the 10th hardest for running backs, the 16th easiest for receivers, and then the 13th easiest for tight ends. So all between, the 10 to 20 range for everything. Very average schedule. Now, we all know they play in one of the toughest divisions in football. You play the Chiefs, who have a great defense. You play the Broncos, who have a great defense. So that's 4 games of the year where it is going to be a tougher matchup. But the Raiders also have an atrocious defense, so they'll get them twice. And then the rest of their, teams that they play, it's all going to be looking like kind of an average schedule. So doesn't kind of scare me away from drafting any of these guys, but it also doesn't push me forward seeing that this schedule is anything special to look at. But I do really like their playoff schedule. Week 15 in Kansas City, week 16 in Dallas, which is a dome. So you're going to be playing in, there's not going to be any bad weather conditions. And then you play at home against the Houston Texans in week 17. So while all three of those defenses are solid defenses, those are all going to be really good games, and they're going to be close, high-scoring games potentially where the Chargers are going to need to win this game. They're not going to be just blowing out these teams, which means that there's going to be a lot of potential fantasy booms in these weeks. And so they are tough defenses. These games could be low scoring, but I do like the fact that these are all going to be competitive games because it means that, all the players are going to be playing the entire time. The game script is never going to get out of hand for, either way. And so I really like all these matchups. And I like the fact that I think that Harbaugh will unleash Herbert in these games, because those are the types of games where Herbert needs to go out and show why he's getting paid $50 million a year. So good playoff schedule. I think it's tough matchups, but good games, which means could be a ton of fantasy production. And then just kind of looking at, the miscellaneous storylines that could change the course of the season. The biggest thing is the wide receiver snap shares. I mentioned it already, but if Keenan Allen does take a lot in the slot, I don't necessarily think that Ladd is going to be a bad player. I think he can perform very well on the outside. But then it starts to look at Quentin Johnston, Trey Harris, both going in the receiver 50 range. One of those guys is going to start losing a lot of snaps. And the question is, who's it going to be? Because Quentin Johnston, if you just look at his stats, like we already discussed, he looked good last year. And they have a lot of hope for him. But Trey Harris is the new pick and comes in the second round. So there's a lot of question marks, and I think we won't really know until we get closer to the season and until we actually see how this offense works out week one. Because for all I know, Keenan Allen might not even play that much. They might save him. They might, only run him on third downs. But that's kind of the beauty with this team. They do have a lot of good options in the receiver room. And then the only really thing to kind of keep in mind is, how much does this Rashawn Slater injury affect them? And we saw their rushing game be very good last year. Will it be as good? I don't think so. And I think that's kind of the struggle with a guy like Najee Harris, where he's going to rely solely on the run game for production. He could definitely take a hit in his value. And Hampton also will take a hit as well, just seeing that the rushing production might not be there year one as much as we thought it would be. And overall, the offense as a whole, I think you got to push it a little bit down with the loss of their star left tackle, because they start taking more sacks now. Now drives are ending quicker. Now they can't establish what they want to do. And I think it's just something to take note of when drafting players on this team. But I really hope that everybody enjoyed this episode 17 of the 32 team series featuring the LA Chargers. Let us know in the comments what else you guys want to see in these episodes. And definitely make sure tune into our next episode 18, which will be covering the Kansas City Chiefs. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Follow us on all of our social medias. Check out all the other episodes, and we'll see you next time.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Thanks for checking out the Fantasy Brains. Don't miss next week's episode, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. See you next week, Brainiacs.